So a while ago, I asked you guys what videos you'd like to see from me, and most of the requests had to do with talking, just chatting in general about books and anime and shows and random things, which, I mean, I kind of do that already at the end of my vlogs, but I guess you guys like that, so I'm finally doing it. Anyway, I was gonna talk while drawing, but then I decided to settle for a voiceover instead because I think I can get my thoughts across a lot better this way, because if I decided to talk and paint at the same time, this video would be an hour-long mess, and I'm just not sure if I'm ready to embarrass myself like that just yet. Before we get into anything else, I know I've been very wishy-washy with my uploads. I actually hurt my wrist a month ago, and I've been wearing this wrist support thing every night. I was told to wear it during the day as well, so I haven't really been drawing or filming much, but I have been reading though. We'll get into that in a second because I should probably talk about what I'm doing in the video. So I looked up a random reference on Pinterest and decided to paint it with gouache because it's just not good to like stay away from a skill you're trying to improve on for too long. Not gonna lie though, this month has been very refreshing because as much as I keep saying I want to make art for the rest of my life, I don't actually feel that way all the time. Sometimes that just sounds like a really bad idea. It's kind of like eating your favorite food every single day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you know, you're gonna want to stay away from it for a while, but that doesn't really mean that you wouldn't eat it again in the future. It doesn't mean that it's not your favorite food still. I hope that makes sense. I'm really bad at explaining things, so I often use analogies and metaphors to get my thoughts across somehow, so you have to forgive the lack of eloquence throughout this video, and probably all the other videos like this in the future. But yeah, anyways, we have a lot of books to talk about today. The last time I chatted with you, I read 0 books so far this year, but now I've read 14, which is crazy to me because the last time I read so much in a month was in 2019. I read 7 books in July, but look at me now, y'all. I read 14 books in 4 weeks. That's twice as much, and it kind of like I don't know if I'm proud of myself or if I'm a little concerned. I'd also like to mention that I'm a poly reader. At least that's what my best friend calls it. I read more than 1 book at a time. Nowadays, I read about 4 at the same time because I can read more than 3, but 5 is just way too much. So yeah, 4. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the 14 books I read recently in order of when I finished them, just so it feels more organized. But I want you to keep in mind that I, again, read 4 books at the same time. So, the first one I finished this year is Roomies by Christina Lauren. This follows the fake marriage trope, so I guess that's kind of like the fake dating trope and the living under the same roof trope. So if you like that, then maybe you'll like this. It's about an aspiring writer named Holland, and she goes to the subway every single day to see this handsome Irish musician she has a crush on, and one day he sort of saves her life from a smuggler, and in turn she offers him like a once-in-a-lifetime chance to achieve his dreams and become an actual musician. But he's in the country illegally, so Holland makes the impulsive decision to marry him so he can stay and get a green card. Yeah. I know that sounds like a lot, but that's what it says in the synopsis. So I picked this up because I really enjoyed Christina Lauren's The Unhoneymooners. I read it last year, but I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. It didn't disappoint me, but it didn't exceed my expectations. It was fun, but I wouldn't say it's anything special. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Then I finally finished The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I started this at the beginning of the year and I kind of forgot about it, but I picked it up again. It's not as good as the previous book, The Wicked King. This just kind of felt rushed to me. Some of the things that happened, specifically the supposed plot twists, didn't feel very satisfying. They were so out of the blue that it kind of felt last minute almost. You know what I mean? I just think that a good plot twist is planted earlier in a book or in a series, and then we get this big revelation at the end. But this one was just like, where did that come from? It wasn't like a, oh my god, what the hell just happened? It was more of like, what? It was like a plot twist that was trying too hard to be a plot twist, if that makes sense. And a lot of the problems from the previous books that needed to be resolved in this one just kind of passed by, like they weren't that big of a deal. I just feel like a lot of things that needed to be addressed weren't done so in a satisfying way. This book was just really underwhelming and anticlimactic for me. I mean, I just wish that there was more to it, since this is the last book and it's supposed to like wrap up everything that's happened so far, and though it did, it wasn't what I was expecting. You know when you come home after going for a run on a really hot day and all you want is just a big glass of cold water, but you get this bottle of lukewarm Gatorade instead? That's what it feels like. Anyway, enough of that. I gave it a 3.5. I still enjoyed it, yes, but it's probably the reason why I fell into a reading slump, so I don't feel bad for like blaming it. Shortly after, I finished Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is a thriller novel, and this is about Jules, and she gets a chance to apartment sit this really old, prestigious, high-profile building called the Bartholomew, but it's notorious for its mysteries and scary, creepy rumors about what goes on inside. There aren't very many rules, but Jules is not allowed to have any visitors. She's not allowed to talk to any of the other residents, and she's not allowed to spend a single night away from the apartment. Jules is in desperate need of the money, so you can't really blame her. You know, of course she says yes. You know, everything is fine and dandy, but one day this friend she makes in the Bartholomew tells her that not all is as it seems, and the next day this friend disappears. And that's where the story starts. And now this was a fun book. Of all the thrillers I've ever read so far, even though I haven't really read very many, this was the first one that made me feel like I was reading a thriller, which is a pleasant surprise. But I have to say that the ending was really cheesy and predictable. I just kind of guessed what was going to happen, but that didn't really hinder my enjoyment of the book, because I went into this not expecting very much. If someone ranted to me about why they didn't like this book, I probably wouldn't be able to disagree, but I did have so much fun for most of it. I was kept on the edge of my seat, before the ending at least. If the ending wasn't so unforgivably predictable, I probably would have given it a much higher rating, but I'll settle for a 3.5 instead, which is such a waste, because I would love to recommend this book to people because of the thrill it gave me for the first 70% of the book. But that ending, y'all, if you do decide to read this book, go into it without any expectations, and maybe you'll have fun like I did. Like, hey, what a cheesy ending, but so fun. Next up is Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. This is the first book in his Chaos Walking trilogy. I've had a copy of this book for a while now, but I never got to read it till recently because it just didn't seem like the type of thing I usually read. It's YA dystopian sci-fi adventure. It follows a boy named Todd, and he lives in this place where women don't exist anymore. I know, tragic. Anyways, everyone in this place can read or hear each other's thoughts, even the dog's thoughts, the bird's thoughts, literally everyone. And those thoughts, the thing they hear all the time, is called the noise, with a capital N. And one day, he comes across this area that's completely silent. And that's not supposed to happen. He finds a girl, and she's not supposed to exist anymore. Then the story goes from there. Okay, I so wish that I picked this up so much sooner, because the series has become a favorite of mine. By the end of the first book, I couldn't not read the second one. I still had so many questions about this world, but I mean, we're in the head of this 12, 14-year-old boy who's been kept in the dark by every single person he knows. And I think that the author did such a good job at writing Todd's perspective. It's so fast-paced, and by the time I reached 40% of the book, I couldn't stop reading. I cried near the end. That was a trend for me with this trilogy. But yeah, there were a lot of beautiful moments in this book that made my heart mushy, but also not okay. Then I read the rest of the trilogy back to back. The second one, called The Ask and the Answer, was even better than the first. This was when I was so sure that this trilogy was going to be a favorite of mine. Patrick Ness is so good at depicting panic, despair, confusion and desperation, but also relief and hope and love. And it's a lot. It's very emotionally exhausting, I have to say. The second book definitely had the most moments that made me forget to breathe. It's the one that I like the most because it's the one that made me the most stressed, and I liked that. I didn't know enough to predict what was going to happen next, but I had a good grasp on the world to kind of piece everything together and understand all this new information. By the last book, Monsters of Men, I thought I knew what was going on already, how this world developed, what really happened, etc., etc. I'm not gonna lie and say I didn't expect some of what was happening, but it was just done so well that I can't get upset. You know when you get really nervous for your favorite character, so you start, I guess, overthinking, like, what if this happens, what if this happens? That's kind of what happened to me while I was reading this book, because I was just so concerned. A lot of things were definitely explained in this book. I think it wrapped everything up so nicely, kind of like answering things that the first two books never addressed. It's a lot more poetic than the first two, somehow heavier even, but not as fast-paced and not as shocking. And you'll know what I mean if you decide to read this, which I highly suggest that you do. This trilogy is so character-driven. The people in here feel so real, and their emotions are so raw, so complex, and difficult to understand. It's hard to explain. We get to read about so much loss, but also so much hope, and I'm forgetting to breathe again. And we get to see everyone evolve, even the antagonists. None of them were particularly good or bad, but they were human, you know? It was about the choices they made, what they chose to protect, how they handled their mistakes, what they did to redeem themselves, if they wanted redemption at all. I don't know, this series is just so much more than what it seems to be in the beginning. Throughout the entire trilogy, it touches on oppression, inequality, war, etc. It's a lot to take in. The characters have such a special place in my heart, and I would gladly read the entire trilogy again just to revisit all the moments they had with each other. It's just so good. I gave the first book 4 stars and the second and third book 5 stars. Then we have some palette cleansers. Because, I mean, just after that trilogy, I just needed something light to read, something easy to understand. I just needed to keep reading in general so I wouldn't fall into another reading slump. But yeah, so I read A Little Something Different by Sandy Hall. I picked this up because of the interesting, I guess, format, is that what it's called? It follows the perspective of everyone and everything surrounding these two people who clearly like each other but are too shy to start anything. So we get the perspectives of their friends, their professors, a squirrel, and even a park bench. So those two are really fun. I don't feel much for any of the characters, but this was really refreshing, and it's definitely what I needed to recover from chaos walking. But yeah, I gave it a 2.5 to a 3. Again, this was just a palette cleanser for me. Around the same time, I finished If the Magic Fits by Susan Maupin Schmidt. I'm not sure if I said her name right, so if I didn't, I apologize. So I read it at the same time I read the previous book I just talked about. I gave this a 2. It wasn't much, but I wasn't expecting much either, because I read this mainly for the cover, just because it's so cute. I picked it up randomly as well, so I'm gonna try to explain how I felt about this book. You know when you babysit your little cousin or your neighbor's daughter and you watch your favorite princess TV shows with her while you wait for her parents to come back home so you can leave? That's what it feels like. And not even the princess series itself, just an episode of that series. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Then we have Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessl, and this follows a girl named Beatrice, and her boyfriend passed away a year before this book takes place. In that year, she sort of distanced herself from the friend group that she and her boyfriend were in. Then one night before everyone goes to college, they all decide to meet up and hang out where they used to in one of Beatrice's friends' beach house. I don't know, like a manor somewhere by the coast, I'm not sure. Then all of a sudden, this stranger knocks on their door and tells them that time has stopped and now they're stuck in a time loop until they make this very difficult decision, which I'm not gonna say because I'm not sure if it's a spoiler. It probably isn't, but I just don't want to say it just to be sure. But yeah, so this is supposed to be a thriller, but in my opinion, it kind of felt more of like a mystery than a thriller. I wasn't particularly surprised with a lot of what happened, and I wasn't on the edge of my seat or anything. I was just kind of chilling on the couch, I guess, trying to figure out what was happening. I mean, I tried not to do that while I was reading, but if you're anything like me and you like analyzing mysteries and stuff, you'll know that that's not easy. The ending wasn't bad, not exactly as predictable as Lock Every Door, but I was still expecting more, if that makes sense. I have a feeling that part of me just really wanted it to be good, but I can't deny that this was a little boring in some parts. It didn't give me that adrenaline rush I was looking for, but I guess a fascinating read nonetheless. I gave it a 3. After I Do by Jenkins Reid. I'm not sure if you've heard of this author before. She's quite popular for her book Daisy Jones and the Six, but After I Do is the first book I've ever read from her. Basically, this is about marriage and falling out of love. It follows the story of Lauren and Ryan, and in their marriage, they've reached a breaking point. So they decide to take a year off away from each other, no calls, no texts, no nothing, in the hopes of finding a way to fall in love again. That's it. This is definitely adult contemporary romance. What I appreciate about it the most is probably how raw it is, how Jenkins Reid was able to write what marriage is about, what it takes to be in one, how complicated it can be, and what it all comes down to at the end of the day. By the last few pages, I was sobbing. I was a blubbering mess because I'm really sensitive when it comes to topics like this, topics like failed marriages. I didn't really go into this expecting that I would like it because contemporary isn't my favorite genre. It's one of the genres that really bore me, and I have to say some parts of this book did that. I kind of felt like I was just looking at words and not really reading in some parts, but it still touched my heart and it got me thinking a lot after reading it because it made me cry a lot. I'd love to read it again in the future, see how I feel about it then, but right now I'm gonna give it a 3.5. Okay, then now we have The Lightning Thief by Riordan. This is the first book in a series called Percy Jackson and the Olympians. This is a reread, and yes, I do count rereads in my Goodreads reading challenge. I just said read so many times. Anyways, I'm rereading this entire series again, as well as the Heroes of Olympus series, because I never got to finish the last 2 books of that series, because my friends harassed me with so many spoilers. I stopped reading in hopes of maybe forgetting those spoilers, but I never did, so I might as well just go for it again. I also just really missed Percy. This was the book that started everything for me. It's the reason why I started reading books. It's partly the reason why I started drawing, because I wanted to be able to draw my favorite characters. And I started reading around the same time I started watching anime. So 14 was a great age for me. Was it 13? Maybe 12. I don't remember, but this series changed my life. That's all I can say. I'm not gonna say what it's about anymore because it's Percy Jackson. You know, if you haven't read this yet, you're missing half your life right now. But you know, it's not too late. So if you haven't read this, please do, because I feel like even though this is a middle grade, it's definitely really accessible and really entertaining for all ages. Then we have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I finally read this. This has been on my must-read list ever since it came out. It's one of the most hyped up books on my list, so I wanted to save it for a rainy day, and it did not disappoint, but it didn't exceed my expectations either. So yeah, I don't want to say too much about it, because I feel like it's one of those books that is best if you go into it not really expecting anything. But this follows a man named Jason Dessen, and he lives this seemingly perfect life. He has a healthy marriage with a wife he loves, a good son, a stable job. But then one day he gets abducted and wakes up in a new life that's supposed to be his, but isn't. So I already felt like I gave away too much, but that's what it says in the synopsis. So yeah, alternate universe, adult thriller, sci-fi mystery. I knew I was gonna like it because I have a thing for alternate dimensions. My best friend knows never to mention it in casual conversations because it messes with my brain and I start to malfunction. Like my mouth can't keep up with all the words that pop in my head. And sometimes when people talk about it in passing, she sort of looks at me to check if I'm okay, because it's just... Quantum physics is something I'm really fascinated with, as well as deep sea mysteries and environmental anomalies in general. I've never mentioned these things before, so anyways, because I'm familiar with this topic, I pretty much knew what was going on by the second or third chapter. It wasn't all that messed up for me, but I think that's because I've just consumed a lot of stuff with the same kind of premise. So basically what I'm saying is I went into this having a good idea of what the consequences could look like. There's sort of a pattern that I've noticed when it comes to quantum physics and alternate dimensions. If you've never touched on stuff like this, then this book is gonna mess with your mind. Regardless of not getting the kind of thrill and what the heck just happened moments, I still think that Blake Crouch executed the story really well. It was gripping, fast-paced, dramatic even. There were a lot of unexpected family moments and some romance as well. I think those really added to the plot and to the characters. I can definitely understand why so many people loved this book. So many people were like, I guess, taken aback by, what happened, because I'm not gonna say too much about it, but now that I've finished reading it, I wish I read it earlier before I was even exposed to the wonders of alternate dimensions and quantum theories. I just feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more if I didn't really know anything. Anyways, I gave this a solid 4 and I highly recommend it. Lastly, I read The Bad Beginning and The Reptile Room, both by Lemony Snicket. These are the first 2 books in the series of Unfortunate Events series. I have to say, I'm really enjoying this so far. I never read it as a kid. I'm not sure I would have enjoyed it back then, but I'm really glad I read it now. If you don't know what this is about, this series follows 3 very unfortunate kids. That's it. My favorite thing about it so far, and probably the reason why I'm enjoying it so much, is the humor. It's sophisticated and witty. I love Lemony Snicket as a narrator. I love how smart the characters are. I love the creepy atmospheric setting. I love how the most mundane things are written in such an interesting way. I cannot stop smiling. It's just that childish, mischievous, playful, exciting, mysterious, fascinating, sarcastic, creepy vibe that I've always enjoyed. When I was a kid, my favorite cartoons were Courage the Cowardly Dog, The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. See, now I'm tearing up. I just didn't expect to enjoy the writing so much. I didn't expect to like this at all because I read this on a whim. I didn't plan it or look it up. I just went for it without really knowing what it's about, even though it's a really popular series. It's not even on my must-read list. And I'm not saying that I enjoy reading about tragic life events that happen to children. This series, so far, feels like that person who acts as if they hate everything and the world is disgusting and nothing is worth it. But you know that deep down, this person is amazing and they probably care too much for their own good. That is this series. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what books you've been reading, if you have any recommendations, if you want to hear about some of the other things I've been reading. Let me know. Go ahead and ramble in the comments because I always love reading long comments. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video whenever that may be.